Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira Kahn, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together.
The pandemic has had such a ripple effect. So obviously a lot of people have been affected by the coronavirus directly by getting it. But then there's a lot of people like my father in that age group who have been massively affected by it, by not necessarily catching COVID, which he didn't, but it's the psychological, wasn't psychological, a lot of fear, but also not moving enough because he wasn't going and doing his everyday things that actually were a big thing for him, like going to his cafe or to the pub or walking around and things.
Oh, he was really mobile and
he was really mobile, but because of lockdown, he became less so. And so many people in his age group, especially who were single, alone, that has had such an impact. So all of his health conditions, because he did have other health conditions as well, are perpetuated. And that's what we're seeing now, as we're coming out of it.
Do you want to talk about this in the podcast or not?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because I feel like this is
it's not addressed properly.
It's not addressed properly. It's this ripple effect. It's not just getting COVID. It's all of this. And it's
And how is England? Because you guys have opened up. I'm in the Netherlands, and we're still trying. They're trying to keep the lockdown, and people are getting angry.
Yeah,
because the psychological, social effects are much worse than catching COVID now.
But that category of people are still moving. Like there needs to be, if you stop moving, then everything just declines. So you've got to make sure that people are practicing yoga, or not just yoga, but exercise and things like that.
But also social aspect, just
and socially
talking is getting that vagal tone going.
Totally.
Because we're watching each other and we're connecting and you're moving that nerve. It's so important to that rest chest and therefore healing. Yeah, okay, I'm glad you want to talk about it, because I've had other people on and kind of tried to discuss this with them, and they're a little bit afraid to go there because it's kind of political at the moment to even go.
And it's a complex subject, like basically neuroplasticity, which I'm not going to say I'm an expert in at all, but that's what it comes down to,
and physiology.
Physiology,
And if you look at all the drugs that are being sold to make people feel better or get better, it's hormones, it's physiology. So
absolutely.
Okay, great. Good, we're on the same page. Okay, so what I'll do is we are recording, sorry.
We are? Oh, great.
Okay, so let's begin. Hello, everyone. So today we're joined by Charlotte Kahn, and she is a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and she specializes in yoga for Parkinson's. And she's going to tell us all about this. I don't want to call it a disease, but a condition, and the beauty and complexity of it all. So thank you for being here. I'm really honored to speak to you. It's really nice to speak to an English person. So welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let us know. Tell us your story. How did you get to yoga? How did it become yoga therapy, and why Parkinson's?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I come from a corporate background, and I actually hear quite a lot of yoga teachers come from this kind of different life before yoga. But I was working in corporate for big media companies in a very stressful, business development role for about 12 years. And
Oh, wow.
it was the kind of typical, I had a great title, a decent salary. I had all of the physical things I thought I wanted. And I just realized that it was kind of like, all these things were just filling an empty space of nothing. I just felt a bit like inside, empty, and I just didn't really know why. I didn't really understand it at the time. But meanwhile, I've always practiced yoga on the side, and I think it was when I went on my first yoga retreat as a participant, and spent like a week in the beautiful mountains of Morocco, and lots of meditation. And it was almost like an epiphany moment of I think this is it. I think I want to go more deeply into my yoga practice. So I did my yoga teacher training with Frame. They're a London-based studio. So I did my yoga teaching part-time so I could work at the same time. And I eventually, as working in that kind of corporate, very stressful, very long hours whilst doing my yoga teacher training, I just kind of got to that point of very near burnout. And I thought, you know what, it's difficult, but I'm gonna go for it. So I quit my corporate job and went full-time into my yoga practice. And it was around the same time that very brave and scary, and I'm so grateful and happy that I did it at the time. And I'd been talking about it for a long time, but so finally just went for it. And around the same time that I graduated from my 200 hours, it was about the same time in 2017 that my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I didn't have any training at that time about, how to make yoga adaptive. We don't really learn that. Well, sorry, I didn't learn that in my 200 hours.
Oh, no.
How to make
200 hours, you're not even scratching the surface of yoga, let alone yoga therapy.
Absolutely. You don't learn about conditions. You don't learn about any of that sort of stuff. But my father, he had quite, I guess, the typical, what people might think of the typical Parkinson symptoms at that time. So he had tremors in his hands. His step his gait was kind of short and shuffled, which is quite common. His posture became more stooped. His spine became more rounded with his head held forwards. His whole body became more rigid and more stiff. And his balance became a bit compromised at times. And all of these things made him more susceptible for tripping or falling. And if you ask my dad at the time, what are the things that bother you the most, he would actually say the fear of falling. Ugh. So there's a lot of fear in it, because of the condition itself, but also there's a lot of around fear of falling that I hear from a lot, from not just from my father, but from my other students who have Parkinson's as well. So I could see all of those things, and you can almost, the physical symptoms that someone with Parkinson's have, you can almost quite clearly see how the practices of yoga, so like the tools of yoga and the symptoms of Parkinson's quite easily kind of fit together. Yes. So for example, rigid in your body, we can do asana that can help stretch and be more mobile and supple. So there was this clear link. I thought, oh wow, I'm going to use what I've learned so far in yoga teaching to see if I can help Dad's symptoms. And I did what we usually do, go on the line looking at YouTube videos. I was looking for a specific course in yoga for Parkinson's, and at the time it didn't exist. So I bought a book by a woman called Danford, it's Yoga for Parkinson's and MS. And I was using that book a lot and, going through some of the practices that it's an amazing book, by the way, but some practices that she talks about.
Show notes, everything that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What was the name?
So it's yoga therapy for Parkinson's
Uh-huh.
and MS by Jean Danford, and I highly recommend it.
Danford. Okay.
So I was using some of the practices from the book, and watching Dad and seeing what worked well and what didn't. But what I started to do is I started to adapt asana using a chair for support. So we would do asana sat down in the chair, but we'd also do it standing up using the chair for a balance prop. We would do a lot of work on the smaller muscles, so fingers and hands, and a lot of work on his feet and toes. We do strengthening. Sorry?
Can I interject?
Yes, of course.
These symptoms that you're describing, this is common for all people with Parkinson's.
Every single person would have a range of different things, so no one person will have the exact same experience. So this is kind of like, an umbrella of all these different symptoms, and a lot of the symptoms I've mentioned. Yeah.
Is it because the nerves, and has it got something to do with the, what do you call that sheath, the myolineal?
Yeah.
Is that it? So due to that?
Yeah, so Parkinson's in itself it's a neurological condition, and it's where there's a loss of cells in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. And this loss of cells leads to a reduction of a chemical called dopamine.
Yes.
And dopamine is the chemical which is a vital role to regulate movements of the body. So it transmits nerve messages from your brain to the muscle.
Oh, wow.
So when there's a reduction of dopamine in the brain, the messages aren't flowing properly. And that's what will cause many of the Parkinson's symptoms.
Wow.
And
so it's hormones. This is what I'm trying to understand, like emotions, hormones, because
absolutely,
it's not spoken about enough, and if you look at all the drugs and pharmaceutical medicine, it's all hormones, and people have to realize this. We have the hormones within our body if we do the right exercise, eat the right food, and stay healthy. So, but yeah, you're going to explain more about.
So people don't really know, or it hasn't been, proven why this happens. There's lots of different kind of ideas on why maybe, but no one knows for sure why there's this reduction of dopamine in the brain for people with Parkinson's. But it's once dopamine goes below 80%, that's when the symptoms will start to form. And a lot of the symptoms I've already mentioned are the motor symptoms, but there's a whole load of non-motor. And like you were saying about, so people with Parkinson's can also have one of the symptoms, non-motor symptoms, is depression, anxiety, and even mood swings. And the reason, one reason is, having the diagnosis of Parkinson's, which is this kind of progressive neurological condition. For obvious reasons, you're going to feel anxious and worried and fearful, but actually it's a symptom of the condition itself, because there's a whole fluctuation of this chemical, dopamine, because you're getting the reduction of dopamine in the brain, which causes the symptoms, but then the drug that people with Parkinson's mostly take, the most common one is called levodopa. That is almost like a substitute. It's a dopamine substitute. So you're getting this, rush of dopamine, and then that can, when it goes down, so there's kind of complete fluctuation. So it's really common to experience anxiety, depression, mood swings, and things like that. And I think it's really important as a yoga therapist, or even as a yoga teacher, to understand these symptoms, so that when you're working with someone with Parkinson's, that that is mood swing is a symptom of the condition itself. So to be familiar and of all of that.
Yeah, and dopamine is also a reward drug for our body. So if we're feeling unrewarded constantly, you can imagine that leads to depression as well.
Absolutely. And then the other thing to say about this substantia nigra, which is this part of the brain which is impacted with the low dopamine. So this is the part of the brain which is responsible for automated movement. So, you know, when we learn movement, so let's say things that we really take for granted, getting out of bed, you know, washing, dressing, writing, cooking. So when we learn that, you know, when we first ever learn that, it takes a lot of energy. And we you know, as a, you know, child, or even if you're learning the piano, learning to drive now, think about how much energy that takes to practice, do it again and again.
Yeah,
exactly. And then once that becomes automated, that's when the substantia nigra kicks in. So it's all of that part of the brain which is the automated movement. So with someone with Parkinson's, this part of the brain which is responsible for automated movement isn't functioning properly. So that's why
all again and again.
Exactly.
And exhausting.
Exactly. That's why it's very exhausting. And again, another side symptom is, you know, feeling fatigued and tired. And again, as looking at that from teaching yoga or teaching yoga therapy, I do a lot of repetition in what we're doing, because there isn't that muscle memory, there isn't that part of the brain which is that has the automated movement isn't functioning. So it's okay to repeat.
Yeah, it's probably soothing and healing to their nervous system too.
Absolutely. And then so that's kind of about Parkinson's, the condition itself. And then
we totally went from your story to Parkinson's. So you did a training for yoga therapy because you felt that what you learned with your books and from YouTube wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, or I wanted a deeper understanding. I wanted to go much deeper with it. And again, I couldn't find something that was specific to Parkinson's. And I, at the time, didn't even know what yoga therapy was. I didn't know what that was. And when I started looking, you know, online, and when I discovered yoga therapy, and I read about what it was, and then I started looking at the courses available, again, I had that moment of like, this is it. This is my direction. This is what I want. This is what I should be doing. You know, using the tools of yoga very like specifically on people who have these health conditions, physically, mentally, and going really, really deep on that level. That is where, you know, that is the direction I wanted to go in. And just to kind of show you how, you know, sometimes like the stars align and things, I was looking for courses in London, and the only course that I could find that suited the hours at the time was this. It was quite, you know, a 2.5-year course, every couple of months, a lot of coursework. You know, you go really, really deep in it. And that's why sometimes I see these yoga therapy courses you can kind of do in a couple weekends. I'm like, how is that even possible?
I know. Last I was looking for work and I saw a job via something that I could be an online yoga teacher, but then I looked at the details and I would be teaching students who'd never done yoga before to become yoga teachers within 36 hours. I wrote back to that company so angry. I was like, if you don't take that job vacancy off your website, I'm going to report you, because this is wrong. You know, how much damage can you do to people with 36 hours of yoga training? You can hurt a lot of people in a class.
It's scary almost, you know, to think that people can get these
wrong. It's unethical.
Especially after doing this very, very intense course. And I'm so glad I did it, but it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good. But what turned out is I ended up doing a yoga therapy course with Real Yoga. They're based in Egham. And
what do you mean yoga?
That's the name of the that's the name of the organization. No, it's called Real Yoga. And I was on the phone with the woman who created it, and we were just having this kind of conversation about the course and things. And to join the course, I had to fill in some documents, and one of them bits said, what books are you reading? And I wrote down the Yoga Therapy for Parkinson's book, which I mentioned to you. And I'm on this call with the woman who's running this yoga therapy course, and at one point we were talking about Parkinson's and my father, and she said, oh, that this particular section of my book would be really useful for that. And I thought, what does she mean by her book? And then just it suddenly dawned on me that it was Jean Danford's.
Oh, wow.
And and it, like I say, the stars align, and I was like, right, this is the right course for me. So the woman who created my yoga therapy course is the same woman who wrote my book that I've been studying. And it was actually run by
guided.
Absolutely. And it was actually run by a woman called Patricia Cronin, but it was under Jean Danford's course. And I'm so happy that I did the yoga therapy course, because it really, like you say about your 200 hours, you kind of touch the surface, was so not enough time. And in yoga therapy, especially, the yoga models, so going into the koshas, the chakras, but in so much depth, was absolutely beneficial for me, and not what I'll really take on. And one of the key things that really dawned on me in regards to the difference between yoga therapy and yoga teaching is, when I'm working as a yoga therapist with either an individual or maybe even a group, I go there without a plan. So I don't go there with, this is my class plan and this is what I'm doing. You go there and you work with the individual, not even the condition. So I don't go there going, oh, I'm going to give a yoga class for Parkinson's. I go there going, I'm going to give a yoga for these individuals who I'm meeting in this moment. What do they need in this moment, by talking, watching, observing, communicating? And it's a completely different skill. And the best yoga therapy sessions I can have is when I have try and have a clear mind, no plan, and go into it, and you've got the tools, the yoga tools in your toolbox to take out when you need them, but just to know, to see what it is they need in that time. Whereas in a yoga class, what we were trained to do was to have a plan. You have a plan, this is what I'm teaching, and that's what you go and teach. And that's a very different skill set.
Yeah, and I think that's good for all beginning yoga teachers. I mean, I started with that too, but you very quickly learn that you have to drop your plan because someone comes in with a knee issue, or someone's got a headache or neck injuries. So you have to adapt. And I think that's the good thing about getting more and more trainings, is you have more tools. And after a while, it just becomes about less is more and more is less.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And repetition is really healthy.
Repetition is great, especially for the group that I'm, people with Parkinson's. Absolutely, repetition is brilliant.
I think everyone, even now, because if we're looking at our society, people are just so overwhelmed and bombarded mentally, emotionally, psychologically, with everything that's going on, that we forget some of those simple things. And even just in a normal yoga class, I repeat some of the simple stuff.
Oh, totally.
And then you see people really coming back into that vagal, parasympathetic rest and digest calm, because, that's all I actually needed to do.
And actually on as part of that, I think people, not, some teachers that I've been in, Shavasana starts to become, like do we have time, couple minutes, 5 minutes, and it's so important, especially when you look at teaching yoga for Parkinson's. The Shavasana is where I really feel like it's where the magic happens, almost, is the way I can describe it. So one of the symptoms for people with Parkinson's is tremors, and resting tremors especially. But there's this amazing thing that happens, not with everyone, but like with a lot of the students that I'm teaching, is in deep relaxations, their tremors subside. Like, how amazing is that? Yes. And that definitely happened with my father. And to have that relief of not having tremors is huge. So
Yeah.
in a class with people with Parkinson's, it's definitely not let's have 5 minutes at the end. It's, you need a good 15 minutes, even 20 minutes, where you're doing Shavasana. I do visualizations, massive.
Can we just clarify, because some people don't know what Shavasana is? This is also for general public, the audience. So what is Shavasana?
Yeah, so Shavasana is at the end of your yoga practice. It's a deep relaxation. It's when you don't really have to do anything,
which is really hard.
Yeah, which is really hard. And I've heard so many my yoga teachers tell me that Shavasana is actually the hardest pose of yoga. Typically, it's lying down on your back with your arms out by your sides, with your palms facing up. However, it doesn't have to be. So students that I work with can't comfortably get down onto the floor, and that's fine. You can do Shavasana sitting in a chair, and that's absolutely fine. And when you're not moving your body is when you might start to notice that your mind is still moving, is still active. So that is why Shavasana can be really challenging, can be a really challenging posture. And we work in that posture, in this Shavasana, which translates to corpse pose, I believe.
Yes. And corpse just means we're dead. We're not moving, we're not breathing, we're not thinking, we're not doing. we just are.
We just are. And just relaxing the physical body. Maybe the mind is going, so you might trying to stay present still. So you might start to follow your breath as a opportunity to kind of anchor yourself back into where you are, into your body. But then I kind of take it deeper. So in that space is a really lovely place to really go into a deep relaxation, is where visualization is a really great healing tool. So I love to do visualizations around. In my Parkinson's class, I do a lot of things around maybe imagining that a warm golden light flows into the soles of the feet, and I'll kind of work the way up the body, and as it does, it's melting away tension. And with each exhale breath, feel like that tension is just melting down into the earth, things like that.
Yeah, I feel myself relaxing.
Yeah, or imagining, and then even going into imagining you're on a beach and you're watching the waves coming in and out, and with each exhale breath, as the wave goes out, imagine all your worries are being taken out to the sea. There's some really powerful in that state. It's really, really powerful to be doing these kind of visualizations and things like that. So I bring that a lot into my yoga and into my practices. And again, actually, that's another thing that's different, I'd say, between yoga therapy and yoga. It's not about asana, or it's not all about asana. And I think with a lot,
I know what asana is.
Oh, sorry. So it's not all about the postures. It's not all about the postures or the physical movements, the physical form or the exercise thing. When you say yoga, a lot of times people might think of, contorting yourself into a pretzel shape, and people say, oh, I can't do that. And, that's in general, even in a normal yoga, in a non-yoga therapy, but yoga class, it's not all about asana anyway. It's a very, as yoga teachers, we know it's one of the 8 limbs. It's not, it's one of the 8 limbs, it's to get us comfortable to sit in meditation. It's not about getting period. Exactly.
It's being able to stay in that Shavasana, so we can go into deep states of relaxation, concentration, meditation, and therefore heal, integrate and restore all those systems.
Totally.
Can I just ask, is the visualization so important because it's using parts of the brain and the neural systems that it's so effective? And also because we're going into that hypnotic state when we're in that deep relaxation?
Yeah, absolutely. So visualization, it uses those neurons in the brain, and as exercise does as well, but it's activating those existing neurons, and it's a really important tool for positive well-being, I'd say, as well. And that's a lot of what the activating the neurons, but also the kind of emotional positive rewiring. Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Is there negative thinking for people with Parkinson's?
Oh, yeah. And I think this is the reason why, my reason why really comes back down to my father. It's really, that's kind of my reason why. But in my more broader sense, is people with Parkinson's would avoid going to, this is in general, would avoid going to a regular yoga class because they might feel worried that people will see their tremors. They might feel embarrassed by their symptoms. One of the symptoms is a tendency to freeze. So like you're walking and then imagine that your legs are just
dopamine.
Imagine your legs just feel like they're glued to the floor. And so people think that they can't do the postures, as we were talking before about, it's not about the postures. So people are avoiding it. And the reason why I'm, teaching yoga for Parkinson's, why I'm running workshops in it, is the more that yoga teachers and yoga therapists really understand the condition, they can offer yoga that's inclusive and yoga that's adaptable, because at the end of the day, that's what yoga is. It's meant to be universal and available for everyone.
Yeah,
so that no matter,
that means everything and everyone.
Exactly. No matter if you're chair bound with very limited mobility, you can still practice yoga. Everyone can practice. If you're breathing, you can practice yoga. And that's really important to me to kind of, share that. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, good. I like that you do this work. and just to go all the way back to your story, how do you feel? Because I see you have a lot of things that you're doing already and a lot of partnerships that you're doing.
Yes.
Is that, do you think, because of your business background that you're very much like, I'm going to get this going?
You know what, I actually do think that. So, and sometimes things don't make sense at the time. So when I was back doing corporate and I changed my career to be a yoga teacher, at that time I had that feeling of like, God, what a waste. I've just done 12 years of a completely different career and I've just chucked that in, going into yoga teaching. But it all makes sense. You're doing this all for a reason. So now that I'm a yoga therapist, yoga teacher, but I also have a business background. So I definitely think that's come hugely in handy for me to make, to grow my business, to create opportunities, even to find clients, all of those things that I've had that business background in order to do. And then just kind of going back to my story, a really big piece of that story is I was introduced to a charity called Parkinson's Care and Support UK. And I was immediately drawn to them because they're the only Parkinson's charity in the UK which focuses on the non-pharmaceutical approach and holistic approach to improving the lives of people with Parkinson's. And again, stars aligned, but I saw a teacher who was teaching for them was looking for cover, and I just happened to be the first person to see it online. So I covered her, and shortly after she moved on, couldn't do the class anymore, and I took it over. So I started teaching weekly group classes for people with Parkinson's before the pandemic in person. And then when the pandemic happened, we had to all go online. And that's what I've been doing for the last, two and a half years or however long.
Too long.
Too long. Hopefully we're coming out, hopefully. But yeah, so I started this relationship with that charity and working with many different people of all age groups, because I talk a lot about my father who was in his 70s, but there's you can get Parkinson's, so 15 to 20% of people with Parkinson's can get young onset Parkinson's.
Really?
So it can be as young as 30, but if it's underneath 40, so it's a small percentage, but I'm meeting more and more people. It is, absolutely. And there's this amazing book called The Brain's Way of Healing, which I highly recommend as well. And this one here, so The Brain's Way of Healing, by Norman Doidge.
Okay.
And in it, there's this incredible story about this man called John Pepper, who has Parkinson's, and he got Parkinson's when he was 30. And it goes quite deep into neuroplasticity, and that's kind of what the book is about, but about how exercise is a necessity to prevent the functional decline of Parkinson's, but not just Parkinson's, of many different conditions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we were talking about before the podcast, about how the pandemic has impacted people in so many different ways. So there's the obvious impact of all those people who contracted coronavirus, but then there's the ripple effect of it. You don't have to have contracted COVID to feel the impact of what the pandemic has done. And I think especially in the age group of my father, where he lived alone, and he became very stationary in his life, or more so, because he wasn't able to do those everyday things that were actually a big part of his day, like going to a cafe or going to the art gallery, going to the pub even. That was taken away for people. And of course, it became very or almost scary for me to even go and see my dad and spend time together like we were doing before. So socially, you're getting less interaction, but also mobility wise, you're seated more, you're not moving as much, and all of this stuff. And that's
when on so many levels. Also, I just noticed for myself, and I'm young and very active, even at home, just because I wasn't doing the social part, my memory went backwards so badly. Just when I started teaching at school, because I teach with kids, I couldn't remember some of their names, and it took a while for that brain and that part of the brain to recognize and remember and be activated again, because it's use it or lose it, whether you're talking about muscles, brain, neurology.
Use it or lose it. Absolutely. Everything. Absolutely. So it's really that ripple effect of the pandemic has perpetuated the other underlying health conditions of whatever it is going on for the individual,
social, mental,
totally has been perpetuated. And I think that's the ripple effect that we're seeing, and that's what's happened.
We're not even seeing it properly. No. It's still going to happen for the next 2-3 years. We're going to see more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stress and mental health issues. Yeah, it's really worrying. I've been a loud voice, like, open up, stop this craziness. Yes, we know already now that people with chronic conditions are the more vulnerable, and they should be protected, but doesn't mean we have to shut down the whole of the society.
No, absolutely. And that's why yoga is needed now more than ever.
Yes,
it really is, and especially for that age group. And I teach a lot of chair yoga, not just for people with Parkinson's, but I teach it at community centres across London, and it really that is a really, really important
healing
group of people and healing. Yeah.
Me too. I have a lot of old ladies I teach in a community centre, and they also, their bodies, some of them already had most of them have a chronic issue, but it worsened in these 2 years, and especially after one of these lockdowns, every time 3 months that they're sedentary, and then their arthritis is worse. They're like, some of them have, injuries that their nerves have been damaged, and then instead of their hand being half open, it's totally closed, and these kinds of things, they're going 3 steps backwards each time.
Yeah. And then, like what you were saying about the social part of it, and this is really, really important, I think, for all groups, but especially when you're teaching yoga for Parkinson's, actually the kind of group dynamic and talking at the beginning and the end is actually as valuable as the rest of it. So I'd really recommend, when you're finished a yoga class, to make sure that there's that bit of time for everyone to just socially chat about, a lot of time as well, people with Parkinson's might feel isolated, and to just talk to someone about, oh, what's in, the symptoms you have. Are the drugs, these particular drugs, working for you? Or this is what's helped me with my digestion. That becomes a very, very integral part to the yoga practice. So you can see how much wider yoga is than just like asana or the postures,
It's good you bring that up, because I've had this conversation last week, I think, or the week before, with Rachel Posner, and we were talking about suffering, and especially in this COVID time, that community is so important. And that's another thing that's been cut off extremely through. And another thing that got me very angry was called social distancing. It was meant to be physical distancing, not social distancing. Physically distancing, not socially. Why should we socially distance? We're not catching a social virus.
Yeah.
And then it's community is a big thing. We call it sangha in Sanskrit. Of yoga is community, and I think that's what eventually yoga comes towards, or that's why we start yoga practice for a lot of people, is to find some community with people of like minds. Find connection and belonging again in a world that seems very chaotic and without vision.
Absolutely. And that again is more important now than ever, as we're kind of emerging out of this, the last 2 years, is to make sure that community is there, and as yoga teachers and yoga therapists, we can create that, and we can offer that to our students, which is a really lovely thing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have, I think, some questions, because we had a little talk just before we started the podcast. What do most people not realize about Parkinson's that you really want to bring home to people? And how the brain left and right hemispheres, how that's important also.
So I think what people might not realize, and I think I might have mentioned it a little bit already, is that every single person is different. So it's not cookie cutter. No one person is going to have the exact same experience, and no one's going to have the exact same symptoms. So it's really important, especially as a yoga teacher or really yoga therapist, is to work with the individual, not the condition. And it's Parkinson's, with that, there's the symptoms, but there's also many different stages. And again, there's no set thing of, after this many years it will be stage 2, this many years will be stage 3. There's these kind of mainly 5 different stages, but there's also some kind of in between stages as well, which I guess in a more medical sense, the doctor would kind of do several different tests to understand which particular stage you're in. But again, it's so to the individual. And if you go back to John Pepper, who I mentioned in The Brain's Way of Healing, he managed to, I think the chapter itself is called how a person walks off their Parkinson's symptoms. And what he did is he learned to consciously walk, and maybe this actually goes back into your second question about the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So what John Pepper describes in this is that he relearns the things that he's lost. So remember, I mentioned before about the substantia nigra being the part of the brain which is responsible for this automated movement, such as walking, that we might take for granted. So what John Pepper does is he relearns those skills that he lost, such as walking. And in my yoga classes for people with Parkinson's, we do that a lot. We consciously walk. So for example, we do a lot of placing one foot forwards, but making sure the heel goes down first, and then the arch, then the ball, then the toes. Often people with Parkinson's might drag their feet. One side might be different from the other, and we practice that. We practice heel ball toes. And once that feels comfortable in the body, I'll ask my students to then have a look at the length of steps. So the gait in Parkinson's becomes very short. So consciously walking with a longer step. So once that feels good in the body, I'll come back to mountain pose. So that getting length through the spine and lifting the crown of the head, because again, the posture in Parkinson's can become rounded and flexed, and sometimes even kyphosed. So can you then walk consciously, but with your spine lengthened, with your chest wide and open, with the shoulders back and down? And then what about swinging the arms? So sometimes because of the stiffness, the arms stop swinging. So then adding the swinging of the arms. So we're relearning. And this is why I think the complexity of yoga is so important for people with Parkinson's, because it helps to relearn those functional movements that are lost. And it preserves those neurons in the brain, those existing neurons in the brain, to relearn from scratch those functions that it's lost. And that's why yoga and exercise in general is so
important.
It's integral and important. And because it doesn't, that automated part of the brain isn't
and
working.
Automated is also unconscious, and that's why you're doing it consciously. Yeah.
Exactly. And this goes back to the hunter-gatherer back before. The reason why we have the conscious and unconscious parts of the brain is, like, for the hunter-gatherer was kind of going through the forest unconsciously so that he could move, but then at the same time so he could consciously watch his prey.
Yeah.
And that's the unconscious and the conscious, for an example, but in a more modern day example.
It makes you efficient.
Exactly. You can multitask. So imagine for the moment, in a more modern day example, getting dressed but listening to the radio at the same time. That's something we take for granted. It's an unconscious multitasking thing. People with Parkinson's might find that difficult. Or, for example, with my dad, if I was having a meal with him, but we were also having a high level conversation at the same time, he might bite his cheek by accident. So you see this kind of thing. And what yoga's doing, it's complex. We're doing multiple different things at the same time. So we're re-stimulating those parts of the brain which have weakened. And that's why yoga, I think, is so integral and important.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Oh, and so what I was going to mention about being automated. So what John Pepper in The Brain's Way of Healing talks about is if he stopped walking, so he learns to walk consciously, but he does fast walking. If he stops, he would notice that he would decline. So it's not about it doesn't doing it
automated.
No. You need consistent practice, because that part of the brain isn't working. So you're constantly doing it. So it's a practice. It becomes our practice.
Practice. So I wanted to ask, have they researched why there's this atrophy in this part of the brain? What's it called again? The
Niagara, the substantia nigra.
Substantia nigra. Okay, do they know why it atrophies? Is it chemical? Is it stress? Is it?
So they don't know for sure. There's been a lot of research on potentially what could happen. For example, there are some research that says that chemicals can be attributed to it. So, if people work in a certain industry and they're susceptible to chemical, but my father didn't work in in that space, so for him that's not the case at all. They say diet as well. So there's a lot of research around the gut health, and people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's, a lot of them will say that they suffered from constipation, like quite bad constipation before going into diagnosis, or there's a lot of stuff going on with the gut as well. Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of different kind of thoughts around it, but no one knows why for sure.
Not enough research. There's no money there.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. Is there anything you want to share with us where we can find you, a practice?
So if you know someone with Parkinson's, and a lot of us do know someone with Parkinson's, so I think it's 10 million people worldwide, 172,000 people in the UK have the condition. So if you know someone who does, Parkinson's Care and Support UK, the charity, is a wonderful place. You don't have to be from the UK, but they offer a whole range of free wellness classes, not just yoga, but Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness, meditation, nutritional advice. Wow. They're a really, really fantastic place to take people to. If you're a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist, I'm running a workshop in partnership with the Yoga Teachers Forum on the 26th of February. It's a Saturday at 10 a.m. GMT. It's a 3-hour workshop. And if you can't make the workshop, it's all going to be recorded, so you'll get the recording. And in this workshop, I'll be going into depth about the condition, the symptoms, but also around the kind of neuroplasticity side of it. So why is yoga helpful for people with Parkinson's? But the main part or body of this workshop is, which practices have I found useful? What are the contradictions? And I will be doing a live yoga practice demonstration, which you can join in with. And I will give you that class plan afterwards. So you've got a class plan to go away and hopefully teach your own yoga for Parkinson's class. So if anyone is interested in joining that workshop, you can go and find the link for it. It's on the Yoga Teachers Forum website. So it's yogateachersforum.org/Parkinson's. And anyone who wants to find me personally, I'm work under the name Maida Yoga, so MAIDA Yoga. And I'm on Instagram on Maida Yoga UK. So please come follow me.
Yeah,
definitely will do.
Show notes. Yeah. Now, do you want to do a little practice with us?
Yeah.
Short. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Sure thing. So I'd say one of the things that's really important in teaching yoga for practice is to spend a lot of time on the warm-ups. And the warm-ups actually becomes a really big part of the class, and warming up a lot of the smaller joints, such as the toes. But I think what I'll do with you is the fingers, the hands, and the wrists. So if you want to just come into a seated mountain pose, and it's really good to have a sturdy seat. So hopefully one that's not on wheels. And if your feet aren't touching the floor, get a couple books or some blocks just underneath the soles of your feet so you can feel grounded. And just check that your feet are hip distance apart and your knees are over your ankles. You can just let your hands rest in your thighs to start. And then pressing your hands down on your thighs, just gently, and use that pressing down to help lift the crown of your head up towards the sky and feel the lengthening of your spine. And you could even imagine here that you have a string on the top of your head, which lifts up towards the ceiling. And notice if that kind of bunches up your shoulders towards your ears. Can you slide your shoulders down the back away from your ears? So this is our seated mountain pose, and something we'll come back to in my Yoga for Parkinson's class. So let's just work on the hands. So we're going to start with just bringing the hands out in front and spreading your fingers really wide. And I call this starfish. So spread your fingers as wide as they go. And from this starfish shape, coming into bear claws. So imagine you're a bear with these kind of claws, so fingers in. And then we'll come into a fist. So bringing the hands into a fist. And we'll just do that a couple more times. So you go into starfish, spread the fingers really wide, bear claws, and fist. And last one, starfish, bear claws, and fist. So keeping your hand in a fist this time, and we're going to work just the thumbs. So can you turn or draw a circle with your thumbs moving in one direction? Thumbs kind of get a bit neglected, so we're going to change direction. And then you can just relax your thumb, and let's move into the wrist joint. So turning the hands at the wrist joint and something you might notice in people with Parkinson's, not just people with Parkinson's, but there's a tendency to kind of move the whole arm. So let's see if we can just isolate just the wrist joint here. So turning just the wrist joint and changing direction. And last one. And then let's bring the arms out in front. So palms are facing down, shoulder height parallel to the earth. And then just moving from the wrist joint still, bring the fingertips down towards the floor. So stretching the front, the tops of the forearms. And then let's bring the fingertips up towards the sky. Let's just do that 2 more times, down towards the floor and up towards the sky. And last one. And then you can just relax the arms a little. We're going to come into a little bit of tapping of the fingers. So bringing your index finger and your thumb and just giving a little press. And then move your thumb along each finger. So you've got the middle finger, the ring finger. So the thumb is tapping each one, and then the pinky finger. And you can keep going along with this, and maybe you stay there with this, or maybe you start to double tap. So we double tap the thumb, double tap the middle with the thumb. So each one's getting a tap. And then maybe you might even explore a triple tap, maybe even 4 times. And see if you can do both hands at the same time. And when you've had enough of tapping, let's just shake the hands out. Just give them a really good shake. And then you can just rest your hands in your thighs. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really nice. And it's really nice to see how the brain has to function, especially when we're changing from 1 tap to double tap to 3 taps.
Absolutely.
You have to count and do the movement.
And so, you know, you can add levels of complexity, which again is good to stimulate the brain. So for example, as soon as you cross the arms across the body, that's another level of complexity. So imagine you're doing the tapping, but the arms are kind of in a cross. That adds another bit of complexity, you know, so you can do.
The brain gets confused.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny. That's nice. I like that. Another question that just popped up. Does it ever reverse? Do people have, apart from remission, do they have remission, or can you reverse the condition?
I think you can definitely, you can slow down the condition. And okay. If you, in the brain's way of healing, you know, so I guess technically there's no cure as such, but through exercise, yoga, definitely, you can really slow down and manage your symptoms. And not just through that, through diet, through physical, lots of different things. So there's a lot of support out there to really help to manage what the symptoms are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much for this. It was really wonderful getting to know you and to hear about your amazing work.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, really great. We'll say goodbye to listeners. Thank you, listeners, for being here to the end.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye. So, thank you, everyone, for staying to the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I really love doing these talks with these amazing people. And if you want to know more, just take a look in the show notes. There's plenty of links and ways to connect with either the guest or myself. If you want to work with us or find out more about us, just check out the information in the show notes. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend or week, and you'll be hearing from me next week. Bye.